Andrew again.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to take questions on the report. I thought rather than diving into it this time around, because I think it was a relatively low-key one, that I'd respond to a couple of questions that were raised by Alexis at the last meeting in relation to engagement in conflict-affected areas, and also in relation to the Israeli government bond holding that sits within the portfolio as well. I've already sent an email response to Alexia on that one, which I'm happy to share more widely, but I thought it'd be useful to pick up the key points of that here today. So, regarding engagement with companies in conflict areas, Border to Coast have provided us with a response on that one. So, essentially, the responsible investment team there are establishing a tool to help with external manager risk oversight and more focused and consistent engagement on priority risks on an ongoing basis. It's being rolled out, I understand, for equity managers at the moment. Fixed income managers will follow, so that would include PIMCO, who hold the Israeli government bonds within their portfolio, and that's going to take place after the next annual reviews with those managers. And I understand as well that how managers consider conflict in the assessment of investment risk, including reputational risk, will be one of the priorities taken into account there. We also asked about any related engagement examples on the likes of conflict areas, which we'll update you on with any reporting going forwards in this topic. So the other area, just to dig a bit deeper into this one, is PIMCO's investment in Israeli government bonds, which sits within the Border to Coast Multi-Asset Credit Fund, which we've allocated to. So there's quite a bit of detail on this one. I'll try to keep it as high level as possible. I am conscious that PIMCO provided a written response. In the interest of time, I'm not reading the whole thing out, but I'm hopefully giving as accurate a representation as possible of what's been said. So first of all, it's not a restricted investment. So our focus has been trying to understand the rationale for PIMCO's decision making, the risks that they took into account when making this investment, their ESG ratings for the Israeli government, and how that's evolved over time. As has been noted in response to one of the public questions, we aren't satisfied or comfortable with the responses we've received to date, so we're continuing to engage on this topic. They did give us a bit of background on the original rationale for making the investment. So it was prior to the conflict, Israel had a long-standing investment-grade bond rating, highly developed economy and tech sector, a history of financial prudence, and falling levels of debt relative to GDP. Now, we've been asking some more specific questions on ESG risks, particularly for sovereign issuers, that's governments. PIMCO have noted that they do continuously even monitor risks such as conflict intensity, and that has negatively impacted Israel's social and governance scores. Those scores were apparently already on downward pressure given Israel's policies around Palestine prior to October 2023 when the conflict began. There are indicators taken into account in this topic such as minority rights, housing rights, security forces and human rights, amongst others. It's been indicated by PIMCO that there's downward pressure on all of those aspects as well. There was also a comment that PIMCO's ESG team can override sovereign ESG ratings to the lowest possible level, but that it's usually to do with absences of data or lack of reporting information rather than necessarily overriding due to actions taken. It wasn't clear whether Israel has been moved to the lowest possible ESG rating, and that's an outstanding follow-up question that we've got with them. It's also been suggested that all of the things being equal, when choosing between investments, the portfolio management team at PIMCO would pick the one with the highest ESG score, albeit this is of course not the sole consideration to take into account. So we don't have a direct relationship with PIMCO ourselves. We appreciate Border to Coast efforts in chasing this up with them and seeking answers. And I think the process that they've given to us and laid out reads robustly in itself as a process. But from my perspective, it's still difficult to comprehend how the approach that they've set out has actually been applied in practice, particularly in relation to the Israeli government bond holdings and references to taking into account minority rights, human rights, etc. So we've continued to follow up and chase upon this one to seek answers to what we see as inconsistencies or perhaps a lack of transparency between PIMCO's policy and what's actually been done in practice today. It has been a frustrating process, but we will continue to engage with Border to Coast and try to escalate this as necessary. I don't know if you guys, Rachel, have got any thoughts on it.
Just really, first of all, welcome the challenge in the way in which Andy and George and the team have engaged with my team. I think it's fair having Andy and I had an exchange about this recently, and I followed up with the team, and I think it's fair to say that they share the frustration. We continue to engage, and actually myself and Joe McDonald escalated this, so we will be talking to PIMCO's very senior leadership team to make sure, I think, first of all, that we do get the answers to the questions, but also to express our frustrations with the way in which that communication has taken place. It doesn't meet the standards that we expect of our external managers on transparency.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, on that item, are there any comments, questions, any thoughts? Andrew?
I mean, I'm still shocked we are where we are and we're not getting our answers in a speedy manner, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, and we accept that PIMCO aren't here and all of our questions are related to PIMCO, and it feels that we're either asking Andy or we're asking Rachel, neither of whom are making a decision in terms of the PIMCO scoring and why in 24 they went for Israeli government bonds when they had a wide range of bonds they could have gone for, and I just don't understand the decision-making process, irrespective of the ESG thing, and the contrast with the Russian invasion with Ukraine, where governments across Europe and the United States made a government decision that pension funds in the UK would not be able to invest in that part of the universe, and you would have thought by mid-24 it was fairly clear that that was the direction of travel that most that the public opinion was moving in. I don't understand how we've ended up in this situation. I'm incredibly frustrated that we're with the answers that George gave this morning, that PIMCO haven't supplied answers to Border to Coast when we at SYPA have asked Border to Coast to ask PIMCO for those answers.
Yeah. I mean, there are layers in it, and I should have said actually one of the outstanding questions that we had is trying to get to this layer of detail. They've said that there was downward pressure on ratings that already had been moved downwards, but what were these ratings when you invested in the first place? You've since invested in more of these bonds. Sure, have your ratings on an ESG basis actually moved with that? What level of ESG score would it actually take to make a government entity uninvestable? I mean, there aren't sanctions on Israel the way that there were on Russia. Russia moved out of all the market indices around that time as well. But it does, and I know Rachel feels this frustration as well. It's hard to have the next level of debate when you can't understand the exact details of the decision making around it.
So how do we explain that to our constituents and members of the fund? Because that's what we have to do when people come. When we get every day, and it's not just the activist questions, but on the doorstep. The war is on all our TVs. It's on all our internet feeds. We are being asked to explain PIMCO's investment decision, and I'm really struggling to understand how they've made that decision, because my understanding is this is not a narrow mandate, that they're able to invest in a whole host of other government bonds. It wasn't as if that was the only one available. It wasn't like and I take the example when this authority got in a mess with Icelandic banks back in 2008, where clearly we had a credit rating. We were driven by a credit rating. We took a poor decision. This is quite different, because this is a poor decision on a day or weekly basis. It's a poor decision on a monthly basis. So this feels quite different. This feels more calculated. I'm really struggling to understand both how they've scored the ESG, but also all the other options that they looked at, other places they could have invested this money and why they ended up with Israeli government bonds. I just don't understand the decision.
Yeah. All I can say is I think I agree with everything you said. But I mean, if we're escalating it to the level of Rachel and Joe, I can imagine that that's going to be a reasonable kick.
I think we will be able to come back to you with answers to your very valid questions. At what point over this last 18 months has this become something that was fundamentally impacting the investment case? And I think it is harder than the Russia example because we do not have the same degree of international political consensus. For Russia, it was very clear. There were sanctions, we were not allowed to hold those assets anymore, it was not possible to trade them. That is not the case here, and therefore understanding the investment decision is much more complex, and these remain highly liquid and performing in an investment basis. So it is a more nuanced position when managing an investment mandate, which is not the same as me saying it's a more nuanced position in terms of what's happening, lived experience out in the world. But I will personally undertake to come back to you through your offices once we've, I hope, got a clearer position from the senior leadership within PIMCO.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ethan. I just wanted to share an article that was I was just reading this morning, because you asked the question, why do they persist in investing in these bonds? I just wanted to mention the Norwegian government, their sovereign wealth fund, recently divested from Caterpillar because of use of its bulldozers, and that received a very harsh response from the US administration targeted at the personnel of the sovereign wealth fund. At Norway in general, it became almost to a diplomatic level. I'm just stating that as a matter of fact, because that could be on the minds of a US-based asset manager, a desire not to trip any of this notice, attention, or potential political landmines or live wires there. So I think that may be part of the reason why they would not take a position of divesting.
Colleagues, I'm beginning to feel a time pressure.